Rajat, the expectation can be, now that you've got this kind of a mandate, at least in the exit poll, and then we'll see what happens on the 4th, foreign investors in particular, whether they're portfolio investors or they want to come in and do direct investment in India, they would like to see the government move the needle on these kind of prickly reforms. Do you see this as a window of opportunity to push things through in the initial few months? Or do you think the Prime Minister, after having burnt his hands with land acquisition and with the farm law reform, will now say, let's find other ways of doing it, let's not try and take the bull by the horns?
So, Rahul, over the past 3-4 months, I have interacted with several boards of investors as well as foreign companies willing to come into India for manufacturing. Largely, the consensus is that let this election be over. No matter what you say and do, these are unpredictable elections, especially of a diverse country. So everybody was just pausing, let this turbulent period be over, and then they will come all in. But one thing that is underlined, and it is pretty clear, these next 5 years belong to India. There is no other island of hope across the world. You look at the state of affairs in all other emerging economies. Where does global capital go? Where do they find places where the low-hanging fruits are enough, the bases are low for them to step in and yield and generate enough returns? So certainly India is that island of hope. Now, how does Indian bureaucracy, along with the political administrators, tend to work together to implement some of these reforms? What I can tell you is that these 100-day programs, see, every government, no matter it is a continuity of the incumbent, has its own honeymoon period. The next 125 days, the Prime Minister has asked every ministry to actually write down priority reform areas so that he can quickly push those reforms through before the opposition sets in and, does the regular politics and derails projects even if they are in
what's your
secular
sense?
interests.
Will they bite the bullet? Or
absolutely, and that midnight oil has been burnt, continues to be burnt. 10 groups of central government secretaries busy at work, and many important pieces of policy under works. For example, a new e-commerce policy, digitization of land records, because land was spoken about, changes to the SEZ law to perhaps allow sales in domestic tariff area, moves on the farm sector. This is what our reporters at Business Today have been reporting, expansion of the PLI scheme. So a lot of work is going on. And Rahul, there's one key point that we need to keep in mind from a macro point of view, and we have Professor Arun Kumar as well. We have had fantastic growth. 8.2% is not a number to be sort of laughed at all. Inflation is under control. Deficits under control. We have a stable rupee, solid corporate performance, manufacturing, capex, infra is up. But the key point is, how will the new government, the incoming government, continue to maintain growth at this level in the current financial year? Because all experts suggest that there is a tapering off of growth that could happen in the current financial year. So this government, the new government, will have to hit the ground running with a bunch of things to keep the economy running at the same momentum that we closed the previous year.
Let's get Nilesh Shah, because he also, in different capacities, advises the government. Nilesh bhai, now this concern, and I'm sure you're hearing a lot of it, that they would, international investors in particular, would like to see the new government bite the bullet on tough reforms, which in a political context are very difficult to sell because they're far from being populist. We saw how the likes of Tejasvi Yadav were accusing that the government doesn't want to hire people because they want to disinvest and they want to sell to the big companies, and that became very prickly. Do you see the government being bold in its economic outlook, or are they likely to play safe? What's your best sense?
The market is certainly expecting India to do big bang reforms. And for example, if we have to accelerate growth from here, we have to capture the China plus one opportunity. In manufacturing, India is not as competitive to rest of the world, thanks to higher power cost and higher logistics cost. Power costs remain high because agriculture power subsidy is loaded onto industrial power. Logistics costs remain high as passenger fare subsidy is loaded onto industrial freight. Now, ideally, this subsidy should be absorbed in the budget, but we didn't have that kind of fiscal space. Now, thanks to the market movement, PSU market cap has moved from 15 lakh crore to about 65 lakh crore. That's a massive jump. If we can divest more, monetize PSU more, and use that to partially take on the subsidy of passenger fare and agriculture power, to that extent, our manufacturing will become more competitive. and they will be in a position to go and capture China plus one opportunity. It will create its own momentum of further employment, which will boost consumption. So something like this out of box, not attempted in the past, could change India's growth orbit.
No, but if you look at the Sankalp Patra of the BJP, there is no mention of disinvestment, and even during the campaign, very clearly, because it could be politically expensive, therefore, there's no talk of it. Radhika Gupta, this idea that the markets, corporate players are expecting big bang reform, and especially on the back of a big victory, if it comes to be as predicted by the India Today Access My India poll, they'll expect it. But the government, each time it's tried in the approach that they adopted, seemed to have run into heavy weather.
I think the government has, instead of big bang reform, I think continuous reform is what we've seen in the last 10 years of the government. I mean, there is very clearly a vision for 2047, Atmanirbhar Bharat. For instance, I think PLI has been a tremendous success. Expanding the net of PLI is incremental and sensible reform. There was mention of China plus one. Now, this government has been very optimistic on the semiconductor opportunity, but that's been a little bit of a misfire. Could that be big bang reform? Certainly. I think this government has been very optimistic on Startup India. There's a lot of reform that can be done on Startup India as a fuel for this economy. So I think laying out broad vision and continuous reform is what I expect from the government, rather than overnight reform in the next 100 days.
Okay, the markets always, Shankar, want big bang reform. Nilesh also talks about how you have to bite the bullet if you want to capitalize on the China plus one opportunity. But then there is the political reality to deal with as well.
Well, there's a sort of divorce between what's happening in the real economy in terms of digitization, where you get instant results, instant apps, instant everything. And then there is the process of democracy, which is slow, grinding, messy. The thing that is sort of striking everyone is that these are issues that have been discussed for over 20 years.
Correct.
The cost of power, for instance, may be mitigated if the success comes to solar farms. Now, that's an idea that went up. Reserve Bank created credit facilities for it, but the state governments have to do it. The problem in India is that we give state governments a free pass over economic performance. And all the pressure of economic performance is loaded onto the center. It is true that the BJP rules in those 12, 15, 16 states, and which was the last time you saw a BJP chief minister actually pushing for reforms? Maybe Yogi Adityanath, maybe, okay?
But I'll just add one more point on that. What matters in the state is the state capacity. Most of the best talent of our country is actually at the central government level. You look at the state bureaucracy levels and look at their finance ministry, their ability to execute, have a proper financial plan. None of that exists.
But Rajat,
and most of the execution is on the states. Center only is responsible for policy making.
Let me put that this way. The farm laws were passed to the center, they were withdrawn. You have a draft, you have a template, you have the FPOs, you have the cooperative sector. Amit Shah has taken over the cooperative ministry. Okay? What stops them from taking it further on the states? Agriculture employs 45% of the workforce. 45% of the workforce survives on 1/6 of the national income. You can leave alone all the other statistics in this country. This is the one single reason why India's per capita income is where it is,